look out and see all of these beautiful, wonderful people here. Thank you for being here. This is an awesome event, so thank you for being here to participate in it. Okay, to start with, I wanted to share that this event is to acknowledge the start of women getting the rights that we not only deserve, but that, damn it, we demand. Yes. It's been a long, hard journey, and it's not over. On your chairs, I put a flyer that describes everything that we have gone through. And again, we're not done. If you look at the last entry, what's happening now? This current administration is starting to take away our rights. So with that, I want to acknowledge, I have two wonderful ladies here. Sands Hall is going to be the interviewer. Do you want to stand up, Sands? And Mary Baird is going to be the one to bring Ellen Sargent back to life. And the reason why we honor this, there's a couple of reasons. This was the launching, the start of the long journey that women have taken to get equal rights for us. Now, I do acknowledge also that some classes of women were left out. If you look on your flyer, Black women did not get the vote till 1965, and that is such a shame to see and read. But as I said, the journey is not over for us, but this was definitely the launching of it. And the specialness about this particular launching is that Nevada City has a direct tie to us getting the 19th Amendment.
Good morning, Democratic women of Nevada County, and so fabulous. I too am really struck by the fact that those of us gathered in this room today are repeating something that, of course, happened over many, many centuries, but especially in 1848 in Seneca Falls, a bunch of women got together to talk about equal rights for women while men were out here grubbing for gold. What can I say? But anyway.
And they still are.
And it's just an amazing honor and legacy to be here amongst you in this wonderful legacy that was started so many, many, many years ago. So we are here today to celebrate the 19th Amendment. It was passed 106 years ago. The last gentleman in Tennessee, in the 36th state, whose mother said to him, do the right thing, cast the vote that allowed this to be ratified. And then on the 26th of August, 106 years ago, it was signed into law. So it's just an enormous thing, and indeed people fought very, very hard for it, including Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucy Stone, and of course Susan B. Anthony, and the woman that we're here to celebrate today, Ellen Clark Sargent. So it's pretty exciting. As was mentioned, Ellen Clark Sargent was a Nevada City denizen. She didn't start here. She was from Massachusetts, and her husband, Aaron Sargent, came out here to grub for gold in 1848, but he quickly became a statesman and the owner of a newspaper and eventually a senator and all these things. But he had promised his wife, his girlfriend, his sweetheart, that he would be back for her. And I just want you all to remember that in those days, which would have been 1852, when he went back for her, the United States is here. And let's say that Boston and New York are over here, and San Francisco's over here. And how do you get across that stretch, right? You can do this, which is pretty long and has some enormous mountain ranges and other difficulties. You could go all the way around the end of South America, or you could go across the isthmus, which at the time was not a canal. It was a treacherous, dreadful crossing that required mules, and there was mud, and there was cholera. General Grant said when he was crossing that after the war, like 1868 or something, he said that the death and destruction there was worse than anything he'd seen in the Civil War from cholera, which is a pretty amazing stat. So, all to say, to get from the East Coast to the West Coast was a pretty amazing feat. And I really love those women with their long skirts and their black things they had to wear all the time, and the petticoats and the weird shoes and the corsets, who kind of got on mules and did whatever in a boat and came to join people out here and created civilization out here in the West. So it wasn't until 1878. There was a lot of effort. I know that Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were there in Philadelphia in 1876 trying to get something onto the Republican platform about the vote. They didn't succeed very well. It said the Republican platform said these things should be considered. But in 1878, the language of what would eventually become, many, many years later, that would become what was known as the Anthony Amendment, or the 19th Amendment, was created, and everybody has a different sense of it. Some people say it was Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony who came up with the language. Some people say it was Sargent himself, Aaron Sargent, that came up with it. Some people say that it was Susan B. Anthony only, but my own story, backed up actually by our very own Terry McAteer. I took a little tour of Nevada City with him the other day. And the house, many of you may know, at the top of Broad Street, on the left-hand side as you're coming, on the left-hand side as you're coming up Broad Street, that big house, which was smaller then, was where Aaron Sargent and his wife Ellen lived. And Susan B. Anthony came out to visit them. And because Ellen had started the first suffrage organization here in Nevada County, which is pretty cool, and she came out to talk, and I just love the vision of the two of them, women, leaning over this little table with their pens, dipping in ink, scribbling out what became, and Aaron walking by saying, I don't know, perhaps this, right? So that they actually concocted it together. However it came about, the language is, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress, yes. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Nice, simple, straightforward. So, Aaron Sargent, who actually, one of his very big claims to fame is that, of course, he went to Lincoln and said, we need a transcontinental railroad, and he was very instrumental in making sure that by 1868, the Golden Spike was driven into the ground in Promontory Summit, Utah, connecting the east to the west for the first time in a way that took just days to cross instead of months to cross the United States. So Aaron Sargent was the one in Congress to first propose this legislation. And it was proposed every single year, and it had to be by a man, until it was passed in 1920. So I think it's a pretty amazing story, and it's really thrilling that with us today we have a member of that amazing story, Ellen Clark Sargent, to be with us and talk a little bit about her life. And I'm going to, at the end, talk about other things that Ellen Clark Sargent did before she died. But at the moment, I think it's time to turn to her and ask her a few questions. And we have a very cool way of doing this, which is what our lovely and beloved actress locally, and I just have to say, I've known Mary for years. We worked in the theater company back east together, which is really fun. We're going to do this thing, which is to have some volunteers, and we're going to hand out some cards. And if you would please ask the question on that card, if you are chosen, that would be great, because Ellen Clark Sargent, who is whisking through time to join us here, will answer those questions as they're asked.
Okay, Ms. Sargent, what brought you to California from Massachusetts? Surely you weren't looking for gold, or were you?
No, I was not looking for gold. As Sam said, my husband had come here on his quest for gold, but he promised to come back and marry me, and he did. Came back to Newburyport, Massachusetts. We were married, and then we made the sojourn from the east to the Caribbean, where we went on land by mule, dug out canoe, and you know, there was very, very little water, fresh water. So on our trip here, we arrived safely in San Francisco, And the morning of October 25th, 1852, we traveled by stage to Nevada, California. It wasn't even Nevada City until after it became a state. Yeah, after we became a state. So it was amazing. We left in the morning and arrived in the evening to a full moon. It was beautiful, shining upon the rolling hills and filled forest of pine trees. It was so different from the East. And I'll never forget it. It's one of the most memorable times in my life. We had such an amazing time. You know, my parents are back in Newburyport, and I am grateful they never came west to see how far we had landed from the East. They were very straight-laced.
Tell us about your family life in Nevada City during the gold rush. How was it different from back east?
Oh my goodness. It was quite different. It was open, ready to be discovered and created. And back east, it was staid, conservative, already decided for you. But here, we were able to, create so much new. And I was busy, raising 3 children, while my husband, Aaron, I'll wait till her.
What is that magical object that sings in your purse?
My husband, Aaron, was busy also building a name with business, politics, and the law. And we had a wonderful house here on Broad Street. It was 1 story with 4 rooms. And, women were very, very thrifty during that time. We were able to make sweet cake, cornbread, and pudding without eggs. Imagine that. Eggs were very hard to find. And when you did, they were $5 a dozen. More than my weekly allotment for groceries. We learned a lot. And we did the best we could. We made it look easy.
In 1860, women in Nevada County were outnumbered by men roughly 10 to 1. What were the women in Nevada County like?
By and large, respectable women. They were wives and mothers from middle class and upper class backgrounds. And, we were strong, forthright, and as Sam had pointed out, my husband was able to get the Continental Railroad on, so it made it easier for people to get across the country. But, we went across the frontier. We sailed around the Cape and trudged through the isthmus. Women, we were right alongside the men. And Nevada City, this is amazing, voted early to allow women to hold businesses in their own name. This was rare. There were many other places that did not allow this. Women here, we were strong. We owned boarding houses, did laundry, ran restaurants, and even saloons. Now, I won't say that everyone was from a respectable and unrespectable business, but, women had to do what they needed to do in order to help the household. And we did that this way because many times our homes were not, we didn't have the money because of the mining. The men just were unable to bring in the money. So we women took charge. And, this notion that suffragists are betrayers, deniers, it's inaccurate, really inaccurate.
Yes, there was quite a notion, wasn't there, Ellen, that somehow if you wanted the vote, you were against everything that a woman stood for.
Yes, oh my goodness. There were factions that demonstrated against us, saying that we were not worthy, we should go back home and cook and clean and exchange recipes. So it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge.
Yes, indeed. I read that actually there were people that thought that if you used your mind in that way, you wouldn't be able to have children or they would come out weird.
Yes. Yes, and the interesting thing also about that is that the newspapers reinforced that. There were drawings and sayings that were very negative, and it just made us even more determined to change people's minds and get the vote.
So at that time, respectable businessmen were members of fraternal houses like the Oddfellows and the Masons. What did women do at the Oddfellows Lodge, and how did that lead to your organization in Nevada County?
Okay, well, I'm proud to say this. My husband, Aaron, was one of the founding members of the Nevada County Oddfellows Lodge, yeah. And that connection with the Oddfellows allowed us to gather and decide what we were going to do for the community. We raised money for widows, we helped orphans, so it was a wonderful opportunity and a place for us to gather as well. You know, the Oddfellows, Masons, Eclampus Vitus, they were all part of the early fabric of this community, and they were full of, well-meaning and determined folks. And you know, when the first women's suffrage gathering happened in San Francisco, the women of Nevada County were determined to get the vote. And we gathered together and became the Nevada County Suffrage Organization. We educated and campaigned in the first year that we started, and we did this all the way through to the end of the year.
I have to say, Mrs. Sargent, that one of the things that I most admire is that you started the first Nevada County Suffrage Organization. I mean, it's really something to be sitting with you and know that that was you.
Thank you, yeah. Well, I've always been an advocate for women's rights. And my husband, Aaron, you know, he supported me through all of it. I'm very grateful for that.
That's incredibly true. In fact, speaking of that, Aaron and you, because in those days, senators were appointed by a governor, they weren't elected, and so the governor of California appointed Aaron to take over, Aaron Sargent, to become a senator of the United States, which meant you moved to Washington, D.C.
You lived in Washington, D.C., off and on for 12 years. How did that time lead you to Susan B. Anthony?
Yes, we lived in Washington off and on for 12 years. You know, the Capitol was inspiring and invigorating, and it was filled with great thought, politics, and endless political agenda. But, you know, the West Coast is a place for dreamers, and we dream, and when we dream big. But, you know, seeing the way politics ran in Washington actually made it clear that women needed to have a voice there. So, you know, I'd gone to Washington, and if I hadn't gone to Washington, I never would have met Miss Anthony. And because of her, she changed the trajectory of my life. And, you know, she appealed to my husband about the rights for women to vote. And he introduced us.
I do think that's just remarkable, Mrs. Anthony, that it was because Miss Anthony was a Miss and not a Mrs. She had a lot more mobility, if you say, in the world, and that she could come to your husband as a senator and say, Mr. Sargent, I've got this idea for an amendment, and would you be the one to present it? But he wouldn't have probably been so open to it, would he, if it hadn't been for you?
No, I was at his ear all the time. I'm really grateful for the time, even though it was difficult to have to go back and forth from Nevada City to Washington. It really was worth the effort. And my husband, bless his heart, because of Miss Anthony, I learned so much. And there's so much about her that we don't know. And I think it would be lovely to know a little bit more about her.
One of the things that I understand is that when the women's suffrage, it was then the National Women's Suffrage Organization, it split into two. Very intriguingly, I have to say, Susan B. Anthony was after the vote, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton was after all the other things that the second women's movement wanted, like jury duty and equal pay and all that stuff. But Miss Anthony was on the vote. And one of the things that I appreciate is when they were in Philadelphia in 1876 for the centennial, the Women's Suffrage Organization was trying to rent a building, an office space, and the only person who could rent it was Miss Anthony because she was the only unmarried woman. And I think it's a very interesting little stat if that is true. So
We'd all really love to know, what was Susan B. Anthony like, and how did your friendship shape your work here in Nevada City?
I get emotional. Excuse me. Miss Anthony was an exceptional woman. She lived her Quaker beliefs, and she thought of everyone constantly. I apologize. I'm remembering all the times that we had together. When I went to Washington and met her through my husband, we became acquainted, and she took an interest in my work back here at home, and later sojourned across the United States to come to Nevada City to support the work that we were doing here. And she and I became close family friends. And when she arrived and we started working, we both realized that the vote was important, but there was something more, something greater than both of us. And because of that work together, she, helped us here. I'm trying to remember things that I can share with you because, she was a very private lady.
one of the things that you've told me previously, Mrs. Sargent, is that, one of the things is I believe that Aaron Sargent built that railroad so that you guys could go back and forth across the country. I do. But there was a particular trip on the way back, and you were stopped in a snowstorm or something. Tell us about that.
We were on our way back. We were on our way towards Washington, and a snowstorm delayed the train. And my son at the time decided to be adventurous and ended up breaking his arm. And Miss Anthony was on the same train, and we invited her to be with us in the car. So we did have a long trip where she was expressing what her desire was, her beliefs, and how she wanted to go about getting the vote for women. So my husband's ear was red hot. I think that's probably it. But the great thing about my husband, he and I did agree on one thing. That, yes, I know. It was important for us that, the population was men and women. It wasn't just men. And I felt that, you know, if we took away half the intelligence, half of the population, things would be lost. And this is very, very important for us to know, that it isn't just men, that it's women that are the givers and we're the nurturers, but we're also smart.
Amen to that. And also that lovely point you made to me about the fact that it took a man.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You know, being in Washington, I saw how things worked. And I know, as much as I might not have wanted to, it was important for me to get the ear of the men. Because without the men, we would not have gotten the vote. And we were able to negotiate that with them not really realizing what we had done.
I think it's such an amazingly and a very deeply important point that because men held all of the power, without the power of men, women would not have received the vote. And I think it's a beautiful acknowledgement that little by little, for whatever reasons, that they were brought into the field so that enough states could ratify that amendment. So, Mrs. Sargent, eventually Aaron was an ambassador and you lived in Europe, and then eventually,
Yes.
unfortunately, he passed from this earth, and you were living in San Francisco.
In 1901, widowed and in your 70s, you sued the city of San Francisco for a refund of your property tax. What made you do it?
This is so badass. Sorry, Mrs. Sargent, I'm sorry.
I wouldn't put it that way. All right, so imagine, if you will, your husband has passed and the household bills go to you and you are required to pay taxes. My thinking was, I'm supposed to pay taxes, but I'm not allowed to vote or have a say in our representation. No.
Where had we heard that before?
Yeah, exactly. So what I did is I did sue the city, and I did not expect to win. But I wanted people to think about and know what it was like to be taxed and not have the right to vote. So, you know, the Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal. And because of the work of so many of us women, we were able to make that happen. So if you just think about that, men and women. And, you know, the Declaration recognizes that all persons are subject to the demands of the government, and we're entitled to participate in that government. And these rules are what the Republic was formed by. So my son George was a lawyer, and I am proud to say that he was willing to represent me. You know, we lost everything that we brought into the trial, but we continued to do it. And we got a lot of attention. And we won the press, which you must realize during that time was not in favor of us getting our right to vote. Not at all. And, you know, this is sort of wonderful. Just imagine what it would be like to have thousands of women going and protesting against their taxes. Yes, this woke people up, which is what we wanted to do. And if you think also, this is really amazing. Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, let's see, there was another state, Colorado, and Washington. Women already had the vote. California lagged far behind.
One of the things I'm really struck by regarding that list of states is that they are all Western states. And this counted in the House of Representatives because this is why men gave the vote to women in those states, is because there were so few citizens of those states, because they were such big states and such new states, that they gave vote to women so that they would have more representatives in Congress. So pretty cool, right? And so yes, California was one of the last of the Western states, was as you were saying, had lagged behind.
Looking back on it all, how would you like to be remembered? And what would you like to see for women 100 years from now?
Well, first of all, I'd like to see women have the right to vote. Boy, that's quite a question. You know, besides seeing women having the right to vote, I'd like for everyone to know that it was a hard-fought right. It wasn't just handed to us. And I'm so grateful for all the women and my husband and some men who were behind us in obtaining this. And I would like to see equality for all women in all walks of life, in their jobs, in respect, and in many other ways, but primarily getting the vote. You know, I wish I could have done more for women of color and women who had absolutely nothing. You know, my daughter, fortunately, became a doctor. And I believe this was partially because of our time abroad and our social standing. I would like to see that opportunity for women who have absolutely nothing. I'm trying to think of what else would be. Having the right to vote, I think, is just the most important thing. You know, the 19th Amendment did not pass until 9 years after my death. But it did happen. So with that, we must remember where there is determination and will, collaboration, that anything is possible. And I'm just one woman from Massachusetts who, you know, made a simple, not simple, but a small change in the course of our lives. So I'm sure there are other things that I'd like to see, but that specifically is my desires for us to be together, to have the vote. And if I can do it, anyone can do it, as long as you stick at it.
That's beautiful, Mrs. Sargent, and I'm also really struck by the fact that one of the things that's known about you is that you were quite shy. And so to speak publicly even like this is difficult. And so amongst the things that I really admire is that you went to meetings and you ran meetings and you did what was necessary, although it must have sometimes been really difficult for you.
It was, as I'm quite uncomfortable right now. I felt I was more useful behind the scenes. You know, I was a treasurer and I organized the meetings and I was a supporter of everyone that came, no matter their point of view, because we all needed to be heard and we all needed to contribute. I must admit, I'm proud of what I've done, but at the same time, I am not that comfortable.
One of the stories that really sticks with me about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who, like you, spent her whole life working for the vote and did not live to see it, neither did Susan B. Anthony. And there's a story about Elizabeth Cady Stanton that she'd been on her deathbed for some time, and the day that she actually was turned out to die, but she rose from her bed and she went and she stood by a window and she kind of held onto the back of the chair and she gesticulated and she was obviously giving one of the speeches for which by then she was very famous. And then she went back to bed and then she died, and she died not knowing that the work that she had worked for so hard had not come to pass. And you had the same situation. And yet what's so astonishing, Mrs. Sargent, is that because of that protest about I will not pay taxes because taxation without representation was one of the reasons that we first split from England, for crying out loud, that taxation without representation, and even though you lost in the courts, what happened was, that was in something like June, but by October, California had joined those western states to give a referendum to the women so they now had the right to vote. So you directly, with that political action of not paying taxes, made the women of California able to vote. And then that was then the 7th state. And then of course, Tennessee went eventually, and by gosh, then we all have the right to vote. But it is under tremendous attack. I'm going to ask you the silly question. What's your favorite word?
Well, it's obvious, isn't it?
I wonder.
It's vote. It's important.
It really is. So I just want to finish by saying thank you so much, Mrs. Sargent. San Francisco held its first public memorial for a woman in her honor. Flags at half-mast, several thousand people gathered at Union Square. It was said of her, it was her strong conviction that the ballot in the hands of women would help redeem the world. It's incredible. It was 9 years after her death that the 19th Amendment was officially adopted, and the contributions of Ellen Clark Sargent and her husband cannot be underestimated, and we're very, very grateful to Erin and Ellen. Thank you for joining us today. I personally just very, very grateful to be in your midst, and we're grateful to the Democratic women of Nevada City. Thank you very much. Nevada County is bigger than the city. And thank you very much to the Nevada County Media Center for hosting this and other educational events like it. Ellen Clark Sargent was the standard bearer for women's right to vote, and Nevada City is proud to call her our own. And thank you for joining us this morning. I don't think I need to say this, but please exercise your franchise. Vote. Hey, can we give a round of applause?